Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. For those who are unaware, and I don't think there's anybody here in Bangkok that's unaware, yes, there are a number of current restrictions being imposed on folks in the government's efforts to respond to COVID-19. We've done a number of videos on this channel discussing that, my opinions on that, just sort of the overall situation. But the reason for this video came from, I was reading a recent article from Thai PBS World, that's thaipbsworld.com, quoting directly, and the title is, "Complete Lockdown in 2 Months Possible If COVID-19 Figures Do Not Improve, DDC." Quoting directly, "More intense COVID-19 measures may be imposed in Thailand the next 2 weeks, with a complete lockdown of cities a possibility in the next 2 months, if the rate of infections and deaths does not abate by then," said Director General of the Department of Disease Control, Dr. Opat Kawinpong, yesterday, Sunday. Quoting further, "If the new infection rate is still high in the next 2 months, there is a possibility that we might have to impose a lockdown, like in Wuhan, China, to control the spread of the virus, where people have to stay at home and are not allowed to travel to a point where food and water will be delivered to homes," Dr. Opat said, adding that the measures will gradually intensify until the situation is under control. Well, I've done another video on this and where we've kind of gone into the notion that insanity, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. You know, here where they say gradually intensify until the situation is under control. What does that mean? Because this has gradually intensified since April of 2020 to where we are now. Actually, specifically March of 2020 is where it sort of started up until now. And nothing has abated. If anything, cases have gone up because unfortunately, viruses spread exponentially. And really, another sort of part of this, part and parcel of this is, where has this notion come from that it's a foregone conclusion that these lockdowns work at stemming the tide of these viruses? Because here we are at the 16, 17-month mark with this, and the data out there, especially in the countries, especially that were heavily locked down a year ago, seems to suggest, and I put up on other videos on this channel, newspaper articles and things talking about this. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but the data seems to suggest at best that these lockdowns really don't make much of a dent of any kind in rising cases. It just doesn't. That's just part and parcel of it. We've kind of seen it anecdotally here. For example, restrictions have been piled on since April, and have we seen any reduction in numbers yet? I haven't. It seems like they keep going up despite, to quote this article, gradually intensifying, to sort of paraphrase the article. It seems to have gone up despite that. And so sort of the point of this video is, we honestly think, I mean, this is what they're, quoting directly, like in Wuhan, China, impose a lockdown like in Wuhan, China. I had thought after last year, we all sort of collectively understood that was pretty bad, for lack of a better term. That, I mean, it's my understanding in Wuhan, China, people got like welded into their apartment complexes. It was an intense, draconian lockdown. We're not talking about, mild measures here. We're talking about very intense measures, and there doesn't seem to be any data out there that suggests that it worked. I mean, the thing spread around the world. So, I'm at the point where I see this stuff being bandied about kind of cavalierly. And it leads one to ask the question, why are we making these presumptions? Why are we assuming, again, the assumption that these heavy lockdowns have worked? You could make a good argument in the beginning of this when Thailand went into a true quarantine, which was very different than Western countries, which were still allowing inbound travel. Thailand took that approach, and I think that was a wise approach at the beginning. And okay, we had the first round of lockdown, and we were kind of isolated from this to begin with. But at a certain point, there's no being isolated. We've discussed this in other videos. You know, this notion, this paradigm of containment does not seem to apply to the facts at hand. And in point of fact, as we've discussed in other videos, you know, the health ministry down in Singapore is now taking the position that, hey, we're going to have to deal with this as an endemic matter, not a pandemic. We need to stop thinking about it from a containment standpoint, and we're just going to have to live with it and, you know, learn to deal with these things. I'm not saying that no measures are necessary, but, you know, the notion that a Wuhan-style lockdown is a particularly positive course of action under the circumstances, to me, not only seems to be quite a bit premature, but also I just don't see where that's a good idea. Especially Wuhan was like ground zero for this, so it made some sense to impose a heavy lockdown to try to contain. But when containment proved to not be possible, as I don't think it's particularly possible now that this thing has gone global, where containment's clearly no longer possible, isn't it probably time to seriously consider other methodologies?